Okay. And the last mode under yung sa enumeration natin kanina is novation. So, here in novation, 'di ba? Kaya dun sa payment, if you remember sa payment, na-extinguish ang obligation kasi binayaran, 'di ba? Yung amount. Sa ano, sa loss of the thing due dahil sinabi ng batas na na wala ng obligation kapag nawala yung bagay because of say fortuitous event, wala ma-extinguish yung obligation, di ba? Sa remission or condonation of the debt, walang ginawa pero parang uh, because of the generosity, because of the yung generosity nung creditor, kinancel out niya na lang yung parang dinonate niya na lang or parang kinancel niya na yung utang ng walang kapalit, kaya na-extinguish yung obligation. In confusion or merger, dahil si creditor ay dahil si debtor ay creditor din ng kanyang sarili, kumbaga umikot na sa kanya yung transaction, bumalik na sa kanya, and that makes him or her that makes him or her the creditor and debtor of himself, kaya nakakancel yung obligation. In compensation, dahil yung dalawang tao, in this case dalawang tao ay creditors and debtors of each other, at pwede namang i-cancel out yung utang ng dalawa, kaya na extinguish ang obligation. Here, innovation, this is somehow different dun sa ibang klase ng modes of extinguishing obligation. Kasi dito, innovation, you are extinguishing the old obligation, pero you are creating another. Okay? In essence, dito sa innovation, merong modification lang ng obligation, okay, which is tantamount to extinguishing yung old obligation and creating a new one. Ano yung mga klase ng modification of obligation under novation? Pwedeng yung nagpalit ng object or principal conditions. Pwedeng pinalitan yung object ng obligation, yung prestation, kumbaga pinalitan 'yon, or yung principal na conditions ng obligation, or pinalitan yung debtor, nag-substitute ng tao para sa in place ng debtor. Kumbaga iba, dati ako yung nangutang, napalitan na nung isa, pinalitan ako mga because of the creditor or because of the debtor, sinabi na instead of me, siya na lang yung magkakaroon ng utang. Parang ganon. So basically here, nawawala yung original na usapan, nawawala yung original na obligation, napapalitan ng panibago. The same thing with yung changing the object or principal conditions. Kumbaga, yung main thing na kailangan na i-deliver, for example, na siya yung or yung something na kailangan i-perform, napapalitan. So basically yung old na obligation mawawala na siya at mapapalitan ng bago. And finally, sa next is yung last is subrogating a third person in the rights of the creditor. Kung yung kanina kung yung isa napalitan object, yung isa napalitan yung debtor, sa pangatlo ang napalitan naman yung creditor. Kumbaga si creditor na substitutean ng panibagong tao. That could happen, and those are types of modifications that may be considered as novation. Okay. In novation, gaya nga nasabi ko kanina, na-extinguish ang obligation, yes. Pare-pareho yan kasi nga modes of extinguishing obligation nga ito. But there is a creation of a new obligation. Unlike yung sa mga naunang lima na walang nakikreate na bagong obligation, here innovation, merong bagong na-create na obligation. Why? Kasi nga ang point nga ng novation is you remove the first obligation, you abrogate the first obligation, tinatanggal mo yung first na obligation by substituting it with another. Kumbaga, either by palitan mo yung object, palitan mo yung debtor, or palitan mo yung creditor. Okay. In order for it to be considered as novation, there must be first previous valid obligation. Dapat meron yung unang-unang obligation, yung old, valid dapat yon. Next, there is agreement of the between the parties of the new obligation. Kailangan may agreement yung dalawang parties na bubuo na lang sila ng panibagong obligation. Third, dapat yung ano na yun, yung bagong agreement must extinguish the old obligation. Kumbaga parang hindi kasi compatible yung una at pangalawang obligation, kaya tatanggalin yung old, papalit yung new. At lastly, kailangan valid yung bagong obligation. Kumbaga, obligation A, okay, uh, you make it into obligation B. Ma-extinguish si A, ba, lalabas si bagong obligation. Itong bagong obligation can be, gaya nga ng sabi natin kanina, bago yung object niya, bago yung debtor niya, or bago yung creditor niya. Ano? In which case, all of these are kinds of novation anyway. Ano? Pero kailangan itong second na obligation must be first agreed upon. Pinag-agrihan nung dalawang parties itong new obligation na to. And second, it must be valid. Kailangan itong second obligation na to, valid dapat siya. Kasi if this is not valid, there is no valid novation. Okay? So yan. Novation may be expressed or implied. But, again pero kailangan, usually novation is expressed. Okay? Kailangan it is agreed upon by the parties. Kailangan merong kailangan napag-agrihan nila na magkakaroon ng novation, magkakaroon ng change in the obligation from the old to the new. It must be expressed. Pero may mga instances na the novation is implied. Ibig sabihin, yung pagbabago ng obligation ay hindi nila sinabing bagong obligation na siya, pero in essence, ganun na nga. Parang ganun na nga. Okay. Pero kapag implied, ang mas mahirap kasi kapag when we speak of implied, kailangan mong i-establish yung incompatibility ng dalawang obligation, yung old at new. Okay? Dapat itong old at new, hindi sila compatible sa isa't isa. Hindi sila, let's say, they cannot coexist. Hindi dapat sila pwedeng mag-survive ng sabay. So, there must be incompatibility between the old obligation and the new obligation. Okay? So, that is implied. Although, again, mas common yung express na novation, express na change. Okay? From the old to the new. Okay. Now, in order for novation, para makita mo if there is actually novation or if there is novation or not, there must be what is called yung animus novandi. Ibig sabihin, the parties have the intention to substitute a new obligation in place of the old one. Kumbaga, merong intention yung dalawang parties na palitan yung old, from the old obligation to the new. Okay. It must be clearly established before there can be novation resulting in the extinguishment of the old obligation and the creation of a new one. Kailangan malinaw na ma-establish, either expressly or, well, impliedly, na kailangan malinaw na meron na gusto ng mga parties na magkaroon ng change doon sa obligation. In a sense na ma-extinguish yung isa, maka-create yung isa. Okay? Because if there is no intention na i-substitute yung old sa new, it might be na dalawang magkahiwalay na kontrata yan, 'di ba? So here, in order para sigurado ka na ma-extinguish yung old obligation at magkakaroon ng panibago, there must be what we call animus novandi. There must be an intent to novate, or there's an intent to change from the old obligation to the new one. Okay? So that is novation. So just a quick recap. Meron tayo under yung sa natin, under sa enumeration natin kanina, which is an article in the civil code, in the law on obligations and contracts. We have payment, loss of the thing due, condonation or remission of the debt, merger or confusion, compensation, and novation. These are the modes of extinguishing obligation. Sana malinaw sa atin yung distinction. Ano? Sa payment, well, you pay. You pay your obligation, it's extinguished. That's the most simple of them all. Pero may special forms ng, again, may special forms ng payment. Datation in payment, session, application of payments, mga ganun. Okay? So, in application of payments, pipiliin ni creditor kung saan ilalagay yung payment kasi kulang to cover all of your debts kasi marami sila. In session, i-surrender mo yung properties mo para yung proceeds niya pumunta dun sa mga creditors mo. In datation in pago, you pay with a thing. Okay? Yan. So, loss of the thing due, again, if it's lost and it's not generic, it's the obligation extinguished, and so on. Okay? So, this is a big chunk of the discussion. So, I hope you understood yung differences between the different modes of extinguishing obligation. So, for next meeting, we will be discussing contracts. Thank you. Good evening.